It's risky to speak up and challenge the powers that be. And the challenge is that the powers that be like it that way. And they want us not to speak up. So whether it's an authoritarian repressive government or an authoritarian repressive patriarchy or an authoritarian repressive matriarchy, they all have one thing in common. Be obedient and compliant, do as you're told, and don't rock the boat or speak up. Coco Chanel said the most courageous act is still to think for yourself aloud. I learned this in 1983. I was living in communist China, and it had been about 10 years after the end of the Cultural Revolution. There were only 11 foreigners living in the entire province of Zhejiang. And one day, Ban, the Foreign Affairs Office, called us in and told us that it was the beginning of the anti-foreigner cultural pollution campaign. And get this, we were the pollution. I was pollution. And they told us that we were not allowed to get to know anybody, that we were there for one reason and one reason only, and that was to teach whatever our subject matter was. So here I'd moved to this country to get to know all these people, and I was told that I was there to do one thing. And to enforce it, we were all given Communist Party monitors who were assigned to us every day, each and every one of us, and they monitored our behavior, who we spoke to, what we spoke about, and they reported it back to the Communist Party every Saturday morning. So in order not to get my new friends in trouble, I actually was silenced, and I protected everyone I knew from getting in trouble by mixing with me. What I learned was that there was a conspiracy, and the conspiracy was not to speak up, tell the truth, or know oneself in order to honor oppression, suppression, and not rocking the boat. It was as if the emperor had no clothes, but don't anybody tell him. And that enormous pink elephant in the living room, let's just pretend it's not there. Many of us grew up in family systems that set us up not to know ourselves or to speak up. I know I did. And what I didn't realize until a long time later was that I had been sleepwalking in a pattern. And it actually would take another 25 years for me to actually know that. It was as though spells were being cast, and those casting the spells, I don't even think they knew what they were doing, but they did it nonetheless, and it happened. And then, again, I would discover that even they were under a spell. It wasn't until 2011 that I realized that I had been cathected. I was 50 years old. 2011 was the year that my mother died. And I adored her. In fact, I tried to keep her alive forever, but I failed. And what happened that year was that I lost like the center of me. And it was very, very difficult. And if you haven't lost the matriarch of the family, you may not know this yet, but it is incredibly destabilizing. I'd gone back to Hong Kong. I'm in my kitchen making a cup of tea. I walk upstairs to go back to my office, and I notice on the bookshelf, Alice Miller, The Drama of the Gifted Child. And I had literally been carrying that book around with me for 20 years. But for whatever reason, it wasn't until that day that I was actually able to pick it up, and it's all I did that day. I read it from cover to cover. I savored every word. It was like drinking a fine wine as the pattern of my life was revealed to me. And that's when I learned I had been cathected. And my brother had been cathected too. And here's how I know. It was 1986. It was the end of my second year of law school. My sister died from a brain tumor. And it knocked me over. because I loved and adored her too. And it was the second major loss in my life, because about 10 years before that, my brother had taken his life by suicide. And this time, I just couldn't go back to business as usual. So even though it was the second year and it was the end and I only had 1 year left and I was in the top third of my law class, it didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was that something inside of me needed to understand a larger context for living and to make sense of these tragic losses. And so I dropped out. And then my mother did everything she could to get me to go back. And I remember sitting at the table across from her at dinner, and I said to her, everything I have ever done in my life up until then was to make her feel happy, her feel proud of herself, that she was a good mom, that she was okay, that she was capable. And she leaned over the table and said to me, "Oh my God, your brother told me the exact same thing." Whoa. And that's when I really knew, again, 25 years later, looking back on that conversation, that we had both been cathected. Children are people too. They need to be taken seriously, respected and regarded as the individual people that they are. They need to be able to experience for themselves their feelings, not to be merged with their feelings, not identified with their feelings, but to be the witness and present to themselves. They need to learn who they are, to be the central figures in their own lives. Parents who have grown up without getting to experience this themselves, they will crave it their whole lives, and they will train their children to give it to them. Children want to meet their parents' unmet needs, and they will do their very best to do that. And in the process, they lose connection with themselves. Have you been cathected? I should do like a show of hands. Yeah. So a cathected child is the child who has internalized the behavioral expectations of the parent at the expense of his own feelings. And something else happens to the cathected child. They also learn that through accomplishment, they gain favor. And they actually develop an external locus of causality, which means that they believe what other people think of them is what makes them feel the way they do. So they no longer have a sense of center within themselves. Self-esteem is not based on what other people think of me. It's based on my ability to stay connected to what I think about me. And cathected children are actually not allowed to develop that internal relationship within themselves. Being cathected is the legacy that was passed down to me. But it's not the legacy that I wanted to pass down to my children. So there are the legacies that we inherit, and there's the legacies that we leave behind. Are they the same or are they different? Well, that depends on me. So what does it take to change a family culture, to leave a different legacy? Well, staying connected to our inner voice and our higher power is absolutely essential. Really being self in present and trusting that and speaking it aloud. 2001, my husband and I were in our early 40s, mid 40s, and we had 2 young children. And we wanted to create a nest egg. So we decided that we were going to have a tech stock portfolio. Some of you probably are too young to remember 2001, but in any event, tech stocks were big. So we hired a stockbroker, and we told her what we wanted to do. And over the course of the year, we developed a diversified portfolio. And one day I woke up, and I had this feeling inside like, oh my God, we need to sell everything. So I called the stockbroker, and I said, sell it all. And she said to me, Katherine, we've gone to a lot of trouble to cost average over the year. It's expensive to get into the market. It's expensive to get out of the market. What are you thinking? So what do you guys think I did? Did I stay connected to my inner voice? Did I honor that? It's almost like I want to have a votive finger. He's like, no way. He's right. So I said, oh my God, forget I called. I don't know what I was thinking. Well, for those of you who remember 2001, here's the deal. I called the high of the market. And if I had trusted myself, we would have made a lot of money. But what did I do? I gave my power away to this woman who was supposed to know better. And I didn't sell. And we got to experience the tech bust. And we lost our entire savings. So, it was ingrained in me to override my inner knowing. And that is exactly what I did. I was an expert in it. Did my mother think that she was teaching me self-betrayal? Of course not. She thought that she was teaching me to be well-behaved, well-groomed, polite, socially acceptable, thoughtful. Instead of learning to thine own self be true, what did I learn? What will the neighbors think? Sense what's going on in everybody else. Read a room. Make sure everyone else is at ease. Whatever you do, don't upset other people or make them angry. If your feelings are somehow going to make other people upset and angry, then don't share them. Okay. Whatever you do, don't rock the boat. Don't create a ruckus. Wow. So with that kind of programming, what I really learned was to betray myself, to betray my inner knowing, and to focus always on the externals. It is the foundation of an external locus of causality to be completely concerned with everybody else and forget about yourself in the room. Anybody know that? I see some nods going on. I see people going, yeah, I think I know that. Been there. Whew. Okay. Here's what we know about being centered. It's very difficult to be centered when everything about the family system insists that you be focused on someone else. And yet, what we know is that there is no safer place for any of us than to be centered within. You know, if you ever read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, the magic that came through that book of him being focused so solidly within that it didn't matter what was going on outside of him. Right? So these are the things that Mom was teaching me. And unwittingly, she also taught me something else. So let me tell you the ways that I also paid the price. 1974, I'm 13 years old. I'm in my mother's store alone. A man of slight build in his mid-30s rushes in, pushes me into a back room, and molests me. I say nothing to anyone for 40 years. 1977, I'm 16 years old. My brother has committed suicide. I am shaken up. A teacher at my school who's well-regarded. He's the football coach. He's very kind. And he takes a particular interest in helping me. So when he invites me over to his house, I don't think anything of it. When I get there and his wife isn't home, I'm thinking this is a little bit strange. He says to me, oh, I want to show you my gym. Let's go downstairs. I was like, well, okay. And we went downstairs, and there's a bed in the middle of the room. And I think to myself, oh, God, I don't want to upset him or hurt his feelings. I don't want to rock the boat. He raped me. I said nothing to anyone for 40 years. 1982, I'm 21 years old. I'm in university. And a very well-regarded professor invites me over to talk about the Cold War. I was crazy about the Cold War, poli-sci major. I go over. But when I get there, I can tell immediately that is not what he wants to do or what's on his mind. And again, all I can think is, how do I leave without upsetting him or making him feel uncomfortable? It was too late. And I didn't tell anyone for about 40 years. No one had to put their hand over my mouth because I had been silenced long ago. And somehow they seemed to know that, and they were right. It has taken practically my entire life to get to the place in which I will no longer be silenced. You can't keep me quiet anymore. Yeah, that's right. I'm going to speak up even if it makes other people uncomfortable. And you know what? If I get to rock the boat, well, so be it. I will overcome my programming. It's taken me almost my entire life to do it. But never again will I be silenced. So what do we need to do? To leave a new legacy? To overcome the past, the one I inherited? Allow children to separate and individuate. To have and experience their own feelings. Don't cathect them. Conflict needs to be allowed, and we need to have a mechanism so that conflict is not perceived as defiance. Children get to say no to you and yes to something inside themselves, and we get to be curious about what that is. And it gets to be okay to rock the boat. No more sacrificing of oneself to not upset other people. So we build a new legacy from this place. We get to stay connected to our higher power, be present to ourselves, honor it, listen to it, and speak out from that. So I went back to the United States with my kids in the summertime, and I said to my father, "Hey, Dad, would you mind watching Pia?" She was about 6 years old. He said, "Sure, honey." So I went to the grocery store, and when I came back, Pia was nowhere to be found. I said, "Dad, where's Pia?" Well, she was disrespectful, so I sent her to her room. And I said, "Oh my gosh, what happened?" Well, I told her it was time for lunch and that she needed to come. And she ignored me. And she will not disrespect her grandpa. So I taught her a lesson, and I sent her to her room. I said, "Oh, goodness." So I went down, I talked to Pia, and I said, "Gosh, honey, what happened?" "I don't know, Mom. I was just doing my drawing. And Grandpa got so mad at me. He started calling me disrespectful, and he sent me to my room. I don't even know what I did wrong." I said, "All right, come on upstairs." And I sat between my 87-year-old grandfather, or my father, her grandfather, and my 6-year-old daughter. It's a little bit younger here. And I said, "So, Dad, you felt disrespected when you called Pia and told her to come to lunch and she didn't come. That's right. She needs to learn to be respectful. And Pia, you felt that you weren't understood. You were just finishing your picture." "Yeah, Mommy. I didn't know what I was even doing wrong." And I stood up and I turned to them and I said, "I hope the two of you understand each other better." And my dad came to me later and he said, "Honey, it's a better way." So here's the challenge. Let's be the generation that stays connected to our higher selves, is present to the deeper sense of who we are, and raises children to have a voice and to honor that. It starts with you, and it starts with me, trusting ourselves and speaking up.